We are back. We are back in the best ball streets. Slightly delayed after a few technical gremlins, but we are back and we are ready to take it all down. Tyler, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic, Tom. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's all good. Been a bank holiday here in the UK, so I had a nice day. Been out in the actual streets, but now ready to get into the best ball streets. Before we kind of really just get into everything, there's one topic that's kind of been on my mind today, and it is how much stacking is too much stacking. Do you kind of have an opinion of what feels like the most you would ever want to stack in a 18 round draft? Like with, let's say, with your QB1, how far do you want to push that at times?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a conversation that's changed this year, right? Because last year you had regular season payouts, and this year there are no regular season payouts in Ball Mania. So you really have to kind of change the viewing to be, yes, it's going to be played over multiple weeks, but the weeks we care about the most are the playoff weeks 15, 16, 17. With week 17, there's some contention. What matters more, just getting to week 17? So week 16 stacking or all in week 17. As far as I'm concerned, cashing in the bottom 50 doesn't really do it for me. So I'm still of the mindset that stacking for week 17 to win is the optimal play there. So I really don't think it behooves you to go overboard in stacking with that being the mindset. So I kind of look at it as like a pocket passer, triple stacked can get there. Ideally, those are pass catchers, right? You don't necessarily want to stack up your quarterback with a running back who's not going to be catching passes. But I think part of that can be toyed around with like the ping ponging effect of the playoff weeks as well. So I really do feel strongly that skinny stacking is probably the most optimal. If you can have multiple quarterbacks skinny stacked, I think that fulfills your single week needs and your 3-week gauntlet stretch like really, really well. I think that hits it really well. I think there are specific quarterbacks that are more likely to be double stacked or triple stacked more successfully. I think Tua really stands out as one of those guys that if you're going to stack him with 2+ pass catchers, it makes sense for a guy that's not going to give you any rushing and who can really, his boom weeks come from huge efficiency spikes. But I don't think you want to overdo it more than 3, with week 17 being that mindset. You really want to give yourself a lot of outs to hit on the rest of your roster. And if you're onslaughting with 4+ guys, what you're saying is you are certain that that's the quarterback you need, and you're trying to get all of his pass catchers. And I just don't think that's optimal when you look at how a chaotic week can go, much less over the course of a season. So yeah, I'm probably going to cap it at 2 for the most part, but there are going to be some exceptions, maybe like a Kirk Cousins, a Tua, where you look at, a third pass catcher being someone that can get there.
Yeah, I really kind of agree with what you said. I think you made some great points. Like, I think there's upsides to both cases. Part of me feels like the most optimal approach are those skinny stacks. But when you stack heavier than that, it gives you that access to the better outcomes. It's doing that. I mentioned on the DraftKings stream I did on Wednesday that when you went back and looked at the teams in the finals on DraftKings last year, the QB plus 1 wide receiver was twice as popular as QB plus 2 wide receivers out of like a 1,500 team final. So like that's
Right.
a big sample size. And DraftKings is obviously quite a different platform to Underdog. I think on Underdog, I mean, Mike Leone looked at it in the Best Ball Manifesto, like, was it 10.5 teams out of every 12-team pod were stacking in some semblance. So
Yeah.
perhaps there's differences like that. But yeah, I think for me, this year, one of the things that I'm trying to make an effort with is going into drafts and not stacking necessarily for the sake of stacking at times. Guys like, Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, these pocket passes, these dual threat players, not just going, okay, well, because I've got them, I should break a tie with another player. And it's something Karane's talked about having access to those non-QB stacks can be really helpful at times. So nothing deep data-wise, but I've got to back anything up right now. Something I'm going to start digging into over the course of the next few weeks. But Tyler, the people are here to see us take down a $1.5 million tournament. So maybe we should get into it. If you are in the chat and fancy drafting along with us, Tyler has entered the room already. So get yourselves in there. And if you are somehow not signed up to Underdog already, you can use the code Sanctuary for a $100 deposit match. But I'm sure most of our people here are already in these streets. Tyler, since we last talked last Monday when BBM had first launched, how many of these drafts have you done? Have you been in these, or have you been in the other tournaments that Underdog have been rolling out?
Yeah, so Underdog rolled out a bunch of these non-BBM tournaments, and definitely wanted to get my feet wet in those with the post-draft ADP. Really trying to slow drip BBM in order to hammer the heavy news and significant news and rumors, and especially at a camp in that June plus time frame. I think there's a lot of valuable information to be gleaned on both the rookies. You have a lot of these new coaching staffs, so figuring out who they like, who they're really allocating reps and roles to. You've got injury news stuff, but I'm really more focused on hammering away at that news edge as far as things we've learned to challenge assumptions that we've made coming out of the draft. So hammering away the smaller ones, slowing my BBM drip for now, especially as like ADP's moving around. I think slow dripping to move with the moving pockets is another smart, sharp move, as we kind of have this stale ADP that the first 48 hours, lots of risers, but the fallers are going to be much. And Pete's talked about this a lot. The fallers are going to be a lot slower to happen and be taken into consideration. So I think slowly doing some of these for now is a helpful way to ensure that you're not getting really, really bad closing line value on players that are falling. Because I mean, for some of these players like Rice, Rashee Rice specifically, we're not really sure how far they're likely to fall. But depending on how you feel about that, it's a bet you can push in on. So, but definitely a lot of the mini schnauzers maxed that over the weekend before it filled. Just can't help but draft. It's my favorite pastime.
I mean, there is no better pastime, and there are so many options out there today. Drafters rolled out a $2 tournament. DraftKings have got 4 tournaments out there, but we're in the room. We're picking up the 12 at the turn, which, I would prefer to be at the opening turn rather than the closing turn at the minute, but it doesn't feel bad in terms of this room. We've got pretty clean, less than half of it is badges, or 6 badges in there, including ourselves. Flavorize This, who was in the draft with us last week. But otherwise, any names you recognize him?
Shout out to Badass Mofo. Good for them having fun with the name. But and Kevin Cantrell, I see a lot in these drafts as well. But and Brian as well. So some familiar names and faces. But I think you're also going to get plenty of random folks chasing that $1.5 million top prize in these rooms, especially right now. Middle of the day.
Yeah. So that is it. We are drafting, let's say middle of the day your time, 9 p.m. my time.
Yeah.
Shout out to David Bindles in the chat. Plenty of people we know and like around. If this is the first time that you found Fantasy Sanctuary, hit that subscribe button. We are 75 subscribers away from 2,000. It would be very nice if we could hit that in the next couple of weeks. We have Eric Beinfor coming on Wednesday to talk DraftKings DFS. Pat Crane coming on 2 weeks after that. Nez from the Badge Bros will be joining us next Monday on this stream. So lots going on the channel. We are a couple of picks away, Tyler. What are you feeling like on the turn?
Well, the turn is what comes to you and how you want to play it. So that's always, I will say I think I like the back end turn more than the one, the 101 turn, just because the second round is so flat. So I'd rather dictate the start of the second round, especially now with ADPs moving around. I think I think I prefer playing it out. You get your choice of running backs and wide receivers. Off the cuff, I like year 2 pass catching back and an awesome offense in Jameer, and I really like Marvin Harrison.
2 easy clicks for me. So let's book them in because, like, Jameer Gibbs is a player that feels like he could get steamed a little too high, given David Montgomery's still there. But if you're talking about players who have that massive 1 week upside, then Jameer Gibbs is definitely that. And Marvin Harrison, you know, it might have felt a little rich when he was going at 18 in the big board, but yeah, I just think that we have to accept that when you get into wide receiver heavy drafts, if I have a straight choice between him and Drake London, it's going to be a tricky one, and I'll probably end up going Marvin Harrison at times. We've got Rich in the chat asking how long until MHJ sees the first. I mean, he's getting very close. I wouldn't be surprised in really wide receiver heavy draft rooms. If people don't like Gibbs, don't want to take Barkley, don't want to take Jonathan Taylor, then it could easily happen very soon. Have you seen Marvin Harrison jump into the first at all, Tyler?
Yeah, I'm seeing folks taking him over AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson. He and Drake London seem to be the people that it's the new shiny toys. Drake London with Kirk Cousins in town, and then Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 1 for Kyler. Yeah, I'm seeing both those dudes kind of jumping that tier of maybe sort of kind of wide receiver 1s. Are they falling off? Was it just a fluke 1 year off? Yeah, so I mean, and especially in rooms that I think we're going to see in midsummer as we get more information. I think the first good bit of camp buzz between that first time it's Kyler deep to Marv in shorts is going to be an automatic 2-3 spot jump. I really feel strongly about that. I think as long as running backs are not being taken heavy and early and often, in those wide receiver avalanche piss boy rooms, I think Marv's probably likely to jump over Garrett Wilson and AJ Brown, being right there along with Puka as the year 2 bump guy. I expect that at some point, just given the profile. I mean, speaking from my own perspective, I feel way more strongly about him than, AJ Brown with Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith, because it's when you start doing especially when projections come out, when you're talking about passing volume, target shares, and allocation of targets, and then you factor in age and you factor in, the late season being so valuable. I feel way comfier about a fresh wide receiver 1 like Marv, being able, and I think people are going to draw conclusions to Jamar Chase justifiably. So I think it's going to be easy to really chase that exciting profile and that upside that it allows you, because Marvin McBride could just totally dominate the target share in that offense, kind of like how Tyreek and Waddle do in Miami. I wouldn't be surprised at that at all.
Yeah, and like you get some people saying, okay, well, is Trey McBride still going to be able to get there alongside Marvin Harrison? But the one thing that there's 2 points where I always feel really bullish about them. Firstly, this offense is just going to be substantially better than it was last year, to the point where at least 2 alphas can eat alongside each other as long as Kyler Murray's healthy. This is his first healthy offseason with this new coaching staff. He's going to have more time to be around for OTAs. He's going to have more time to get used to the playbook, be able to feed back and tell them what he did and didn't like last year. But it's also just that kind of thing of the Cardinals. I don't think that their defense is sorted out yet. Bad defense forces more pass-heavy offensive scripts, and that should be really good for fantasy. So for me, I'm very much in on the idea that both Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison can get there. And like many people within the community, I do like Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch a little bit too. I'm not sure I'm drafting both of those guys on top of stacks, like we kind of talked about earlier, but adding one of those to even Marvin Harrison or Trey McBride or as a 3 stack on top of Kyler feels fine.
Absolutely.
So we did start with Jameer Gibbs and Marvin Harrison. Since then, there's been another 8, 10, 11 wide receivers who've gone off the board in what's kind of nothing too crazy. Kyren Williams still stays at the back of round 2 in this draft. Have you been taking Kyren Williams in the sort of round 2-3 turn, or you feel more comfortable in round 3 on him at the minute?
I mean, I've gotten him. I've been tempted, taking CMC 101, and he falls back to the back end. And at that point, it's as far as weekly upside, I don't mind at all having 2 running backs who, again, I think the excitement about Corum is getting a little out of hand, because the quote running around right now from Coach Speak Index is from middle of the season, I think November, when Kyron had just come off of a 95%, snap usage. It was asked about that, and he said, "Yeah, we'd like to get his snaps down from that. We don't want him to have to run 95, 100% snaps." Okay, well, that's less snaps. And then another quote comes out that we like him in that, 80 to 85% snaps range. So it's like you're talking about a running back that could get anywhere from 80 to 85, depending on how good Corum is and fits into that offense. As far as the coaching staff still saying they love him and they want to use him and they want to keep him fresh. Well, we hear that about a lot of guys all the time. Same thing with ETN. But if you don't bring in someone that can actually mix in and pass block well and fit into the scheme well, then I still like a guy who could still go for 3+ touchdowns in a really good offense. Because we've gotten over our skis before with Tank Bigsby and ETN. So I'm not going to automatically trust the consensus assumption that Corum is the guy. And we're back up at the turn.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not a fun part of the draft particularly. I think could look at quarterback, could look at like a Ravens stack if you wanted, but otherwise, there's nobody screaming out to me. I don't mind Michael Pittman.
He's not fun, and I think at the turn, I tend to kind of want to dictate. So I'm here for the Baltimore stack. The question is, do we want him stacked up with Zay or Mark Andrews?
Well, why don't we take Zay and then see if either Mark Andrews or McBride falls back to us and give ourselves that kind of option of one of the elite tight ends, perhaps. I think, it's unlikely, we definitely could be in a situation where neither do, but I always kind of like having that optionality a little bit more sometimes. It does feel like with only one tight end off the board so far, we might lose a couple, but Travis Kelce is steaming up draft boards and he goes off just to say that to the point where now I think he's up to tight end 2, which it's kind of like almost double counting really for me. We saw Travis Kelce get back to that elite point during the playoffs. But if the Chiefs really did try to keep him fresh through the season last year, and now he's got increased competition, is he going to be, worth having as tight end 2? He's a player who I won't fade and I'll mix in at times simply because we know what that 1 week spike production is like and how good he is. But yeah, I think I was slightly more comfortable steaming Mahomes up draft boards than I am Kelce.
Yeah, especially when you think, okay, the most valuable weeks to me are week 15, 16, and 17 in that order ascending. And given week 17, Andy Reid has been public about we will scale down his workload to get ready for the playoffs. And if the Chiefs continue to be Super Bowl favorites, they'll be favorites for the 1 seed or 2 seed, which means a bye week. And how likely is it that, and I like to start gigabraining this, so how likely is the nearly 35-year-old tight end on a really stacked offense compared to last year? I mean, they were scaling him down last year in snaps and usage, even with a bunch of, trash cans and Rashee Rice running passes. So how much more do they adjust to that going into, his age 35 season? I at that point, I get what you're banking on, but his spikes declined last year. We weren't seeing a lot of those multi-touchdown weeks like we had before. And at that point, I know 4th-round price is, it's nice compared to what he was at, but I think contextually it might be a little anchored to what we've seen in the past. And I think it pays off to look forward a little bit more. And at that point, I think justifiably you tend to be more certain and excited about the younger guys, Laporta, McBride, Kincaid down the stretch versus, Kelce and even, Andrews. Andrews is older at this point. He has had a few injuries, some fluky, some not. He definitely didn't look like himself coming into the playoffs last year. You hope and pray that improves down, into camp and coming into the season. But age is a factor, and it starts to be a thing. And when you've seen multi-year declines in efficiency, I think that's something to keep in mind because we're talking about a 1 week, a 1 week slate at the end of the day. And, given price, if I can get another player and a guy like McBride or Andrews, I'm going to prefer that most times than Kelsey, like you said, because I think name brand alone is going to chase a lot of these guys up over the summer. I think tight ends are all going to kind of shift together with that because you see those tight end runs happen, just like we see with QB runs. So I agree that I was much more comfortable with Kelsey going, closer to the 4 or 5 turn pre-draft than post-draft. You mentioned they drafted a first-round rookie receiver that they're comparing to Deshaun Jackson, and for some reason Travis Kelsey's moving up because I guess people said if he retires, which was the rumor pre-draft, then 5th round, 6th round price, that's okay. But 4th round, I guess now we're not worried about retirement with the 2-year extension, even though retirement was unlikely given how the staff was talking about it. So yeah, the market's weirdly double counting things, and I think at that point it's best to just kind of sit out unless you have a stack.
Yeah. So neither of the Titans do make it back to us, which is always the risk. But hey, we talked at the top of the show about skinny stacks, and Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers feels kind of fine with that. We're approaching an area where wide receivers drying up a little bit. We could take Xavier Worthy, Roma Dunze, the rookies who've got questions. There's George Kittle, who I was out on last year. I don't feel particularly strongly about this year, but if you wanted a top end tight end, he's probably the best one left. Anybody else stand out to you, Tyler?
I was okay with Mixon going, at the 5-6 turn, given his workload, but he goes in front of us. I'm kind of eyeing Terry, Worthy, Brian. Like I don't mind the rookies. I don't mind Gibbs being kind of that hero running back.
Yep.
And then I don't mind Kittle. So
Let's take Terry then. Yeah, that works for me. And then, yeah, I mean, for me, it's probably Xavier Worthy, unless you want to bang the table strong.
No, I like it. I think we've got two first-round rookies in a really great class on offenses we expect to be better and potentially top 5. And then I think from a tight end place, we can arbitrage it decently, especially because I've seen Kittle being the tight end that falls the most often.
Yeah.
Typically, folks aren't taking him unless it's a stack. So I'm comfortable seeing how the tight end board falls to us one more time.
Yeah. Shout out to Historical Anomalies in the chat saying, listen to you fellas while mowing the lawn. It's hot best ball summer. Everyone should join the Fantasy Sanctuary Discord to get Tom's best ball survival kit. Hit the join button below. Both Tyler and myself are in there. A lot of best ball players in there. A lot of Dynasty people. Rich's Dynasty Survival Guide. My best ball survival kit with, you've got your exposure tracker, Underdog, DraftKings best ball rankings, got targets and fades, individual rankings by position, stacking charts, all my articles linked in there. Hit 250 articles in the last 2 years on FantasyPros this week. So grinding the content out. So yeah, in general, this draft kind of feels quite nice so far. We've got Lamar Jackson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Marvin Harrison, Zay Flowers, Terry McLaurin, Xavier Worthy. It feels like we've hit that point in the draft where nothing's really going to force our next decision at the very least. We've got ourselves out of jail at wide receiver to the point where things feel comfortable enough. But yeah, we can lean on that hero RB, elite quarterback pairing, and just take it from there. How much have you found yourself going with hero RB drafts so far this year, Tyler?
Quite a bit, just because you've kind of got 2 pockets after the top 3 rounds to target. That 5th to 6th round still has running backs that haven't shifted enough in Pacheco and Mixon. And then you've got the pocket from the 7th to the 10th round with anybody from the Pittsburgh running backs to the Washington running backs. You've got DeAndre Swift, who comes away from the draft super clean and now has like Herbert rumors being traded away, which would only help him consolidate even more of the work, considering how the coaching staff kind of allocated trust and responsibility on Roshan versus Herbert last year. So I don't feel a lot of pressure to rush my second running back if I take one in the first 2 rounds, considering those profiles. You've also got guys like James Conner falling. So I think it's just you've got a lot of nice pockets of running back that, especially with how Underdog goes, receivers are going to be steamed up and they're going to shift, especially the rookies. And what I also like about us taking guys like Worthy and Harrison, is those are two guys likely to keep rising, and CLV we know is something that matters. So drafting this early, the other aspect you have to kind of work into your puzzle is making sure to take guys who are not likely to lose value, and even better if they are guys that rise. And I think all of these guys on our roster right now really fit that mold. Even Flowers, who I think we saw him fall into the 5th round at points pre-draft due to some of the legal rumor issues. And so I think if news comes out that he's in the clear and there's nothing incoming this season, I think he gets that extra double counted year 2 bump that we kind of saw coming right into all the pre-draft tournaments, and he could easily rise, especially as we're going to see a lot of ADP shift just for stacking purposes and start lining up even more. So I think targeting those guys is really smart, and I think taking a guy like Jameer, you're making the bet that he's going to provide several, if not mostly useful spike weeks season long, and so I think doubting that bet early only hurts your initial bet. If Jameer is doing enough to pay off a first round draft capital, then we don't need to be rushing to fill the second running back spot early.
No, love that point. So we are a couple of picks away, and Ramondre Stevenson, Kyler Murray, we could add a second quarterback and sort of really round out that position and be done with it if you wanted. Zamir White, who hasn't really jumped as high as some people thought he might do without the Raiders kind of adding anyone significantly. DeAndre Hopkins, which is a price I've been willing to pay. I feel like he's completely fine. Anybody for you, Tyler, who you're particularly liking here?
Yeah, I don't know. I like the idea of Kyler and Lamar and being done, having 2 high floor, high ceiling skinny stacks. It feels a little expensive, but I think I kind of like the idea of being done with quarterback and then having only one spot in tight end that we are having to backfill from, you get quantity or quality. So here I think is an interesting discussion point. Do we want a receiver or running back? I don't feel super strongly about any of this.
I think I'd go receiver simply because the gulf there is going to drop off quite a bit. I'd be fine with DeAndre Hopkins, Curtis Samuel. Yeah, I think that's kind of the two who stand out to me. Probably DeAndre Hopkins, really. I'm not expecting Will Levis to suddenly become a great quarterback, but I think for fantasy football, he was really fun last year. He's not afraid to go deep, and he's not afraid to ball out. And I was listening to Legendary Upside today, and Crane kept making the point that people still seem to be thinking the Titans aren't going to be pass heavy. But it's a new coaching staff. We know they've got more roots with the Bengals than any other team, and you would expect that they are going to pass the ball, and hopefully it could be good fun. But yeah, they're not a team I particularly want to. I can't see myself double stacking Will Levis with both Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins at any point particularly, but I don't mind taking pieces of it and just supplementing other stacks with it.
Yeah, I think another aspect of the stacking thing that we didn't touch on, but you bring up now, is price is important, right? So stacking becomes the more expensive a stack is, the more certain you have to be that bet pays off. And so for a team like the Titans, the one thing that does behoove a double or a triple stack is that all of their guys are relatively inexpensive, especially when you get past Hopkins. Tajay and Pollard go in the 80s and 90s. Tajay's going in the 120s, I think. And then you've got Levis going, anywhere between 150 and 170. So as far as price is concerned, what you're spending on them in draft capital, you don't have to be as correct. And so I think being cognizant of what you're paying for that stack is another important piece to that. And I think one thing I talked about early on in the draft cycle, pre-draft, was one of the things I really learned even more from last year is that if you're fading a guy, and I'm not super in on Calvin Ridley, given that we've seen his type of profile leaving one offense to another, so he's got to acclimate again. He looked less efficient. The film guys even noted that they had to manufacture his routes and his openness in order to get him where he needed to go. His usage is really good, but he's not on that team anymore using him that way. We're not certain how he's going to be utilized in this new offense. And we saw him be really inefficient with what he was given. So that and he's not young. So all those things make me really nervous and hesitant to be comfortable making that click, especially given that price, which has fallen a bit, I think, justifiably, especially now that they have a rookie in Brian Thomas, who looks like, or Brian Thomas replacing him, who looks like the bigger, faster version of him. Now you've got Treylon might be traded away from the Titans, but they might replace him with Zay Jones or with Tyler Boyd. So that brings up concerns about, if they bring in someone that's better than Treylon to compete with Ridley, and we know Nuke looked still really efficient and has that chemistry with Levis in there. So I say all that to say that fading one guy, if you can also pull the other lever in, well, if you're making the bet that Ridley's not going to pay off or not be worth his price, then it's very likely that Nuke is if not really, really outperforms that. So I like taking DeAndre Hopkins for both of those levers of fading Ridley in that offense, and DeAndre could be the alpha in that offense of a high pass volume. We think the volume is going to be really high. They have two running backs that are interchangeable as pass catchers. So I think all the signal points to that, and DeAndre is only getting cheaper.
So where did Ridley went? About 6 picks before Hopkins, and here his ADP is about 14 spots higher. And for me, that's just an easy one. Like I would be taking Hopkins over Ridley straight up. Simply, I know part of it came down to the Jags and the scheme and what you talked about, and how difficult things were at time on the post-draft rookie mock, which did with Rich. We talked about how everyone within the Jags offense had defined roles, and really it would have been great to see Ridley get some stuff across the middle of the field. But yeah, I trust more what I've seen from Hopkins. I trust more about how he plays and how he wins. And I'd be absolutely willing to just flip those ADPs completely and take Hopkins every single time.
Yeah, I'd be more interested if Ridley was falling more often. I'd be fine splitting it down the middle at that, 8-9 turn. But the market is just really, really high on that old expected usage, and we don't always see a team change be beneficial when that player isn't elite. And I don't think anything looked like an elite Calvin Ridley last year.
So since our last pick, there's been 10 running backs come off the board. You know it's coming around this point in the draft when you get to the end of the sort of like 8th and 9th round. It's coming. In terms of the players who are there, Trey Benson, Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson, Devin Singletary. I'm not in on Eckler. I think he's going to be one of my biggest fades this year. I just don't believe that he's suddenly going to be good and see the kind of volume he needs from Jaden Daniels to be worthwhile. But who are you liking, Tyler?
Well, we didn't take James Conner, and we have Kyler Murray with Marv. So I think it makes sense to take Trey here, who does fall a few picks past ADP. I think as a rookie running back with some juice. I don't love his profile, but it's no secret that Connor's older. So I think it just makes sense as far as stacking with a pass catching profile running back. And then I think, I don't love the receivers here either. Lockett's fine, and I prefer to take another running back here and
my lean would be either the two that you've starred, Brian Robinson or Devin Singletary, and it's a coin flip for me, so I'm happy for you to call that one.
Well, I prefer Brian Robinson straight up, and we also have Terry McLaurin, so we have that stat correlation. I really feel like Brian Robinson is poorly priced, given that he profiles better as the goal line running back. He had some pass catching upside, and Eckler's much older. He does not have a strong contract. He looked in declining efficiency before the injury, and every indication from Dan Quinn before that signing was that Brian Robinson was the type of back he really liked, and we know Cliff used Connor in the season he blew up was and way outpaid his, I think it was a 14th round ADP, was just an insane red zone usage. And they have a rookie quarterback in tow. So
who doesn't rush in the red zone an awful lot either. Like that's not Jaden Daniels' thing.
Right. And we also know that rushing quarterbacks increase the efficiency of runners. So I think we could see a huge boost to this run game, and I'm not at all going to be surprised when Brian Robinson is the one paying off week in and week out, given his age, his athleticism, and the offense as a whole.
And, we do have to mention not being shot this offseason, touch wood. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that his ADP is still behind Eckler's hasn't made sense to me at all. In my rankings, I've got Brian Robinson, I think something like 15 spots ahead of ADP. And then I've got Eckler 22 spots behind ADP. I love Austin Eckler. The guy is an absolute stud, has been a stud, but what we saw last year does not inspire. And yeah, I think I'd rather take shots on Brian Robinson, who not long ago, after the combine, Matthew Berry was writing up saying the Commanders absolutely loved him and were ready to give him a lot of work this year. So yeah, I feel pretty good about that. So you just recap as the team as we kind of get through into round 10.
We have a 2-3-5 build from the 12 spot with Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray at quarterback. Running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Trey Benson, and Brian Robinson Jr. And at wide receiver, we have Marvin Harrison, Zay Flowers, Terry McLaurin, Xavier Worthy, and DeAndre Hopkins. Really liking the build with young players and high upside veterans. I think floor ceiling is really nice from a season-long perspective. And then, it does not take much imagination on my part to think into week 17, you have 2 high ceiling rushing quarterbacks, 3 high ceiling running backs that all have pass catching upside to their names, but also size and offenses that they could just absolutely pop in the red zone. And then receivers that have really exciting profiles. Terry McLaurin is one I've started to come around on just because if Jaden Daniels is this really efficient deep passer, Terry McLaurin's by far the best receiver on his team. He has not had really good quarterback play most of his career. And if Jaden is even average and really efficient in the deep area of the field where Terry really wins, Terry could provide a huge payoff at his price. And we know that he should be a target hog, at least from a floor perspective, in Cliff's offense that likes to line up his guys on one side of the field and just be PPR scams. So I really like how this team's come together so far.
I think that's such a big part of it for Terry McLaurin this year, that it's not just about the fact that Jaden Daniels is probably the best quarterback who he's played with. It's also that thing that this offense with Jaden Daniels can potentially stay on the field so much more often than any of the ones which he's been in for the last couple of years. And while he's a bit of an older player, so he gets a bit of hate in the dynasty circles, and he's never really given you that true top-end wide receiver finish, he's definitely not a player that I'm taking a stance against this year, and I would expect probably be in that sort of 10% range on him when everything's done and dusted and the NFL games are finally here. But yeah, I just think taking him there felt like the right pick as well, because it gets pretty dusty pretty quickly.
It does. And the other thing, we noted that Nuke super volatile with the quarterback room, but underlying advanced metrics looked really, really good. Same thing with Terry McLaurin. Advanced metrics told us that he still looks awesome. His QB room was just really volatile. So what happens if that returns to, average to even great? Upside bet looks great.
So Devin Singletary's fallen, like 20 spots past ADP? I'd be fine taking him here. That feels like a real bargain.
It feels like a smash.
Yeah, I don't know why he's fallen, but I'd take that every day of the week. In terms of other players, we probably, we can go back to wide receiver for one, or is there any tight ends standing out? That's something we haven't looked at really yet. I'm not massively in on Cole Kmet.
Kmet feels like a floor play. I don't love it. He also seems like he could fall just with even more projections FUD. So I think receiver or running back here, probably receiver.
Yeah, I quite like Brandon Cooks. For me, feels like he's going a little undervalued because he had a good season last year. Michael Gallup's gone now. We're not going to see the Cowboys make any kind of crazy ads at this point that feel particularly like it's going to eat into Brandon Cook's work. I do think Jalen Tolbert is going to take a bit of a leap, but yeah, Brandon Cooks feels fine at this point of the draft. I would take him, ahead of Jerry Jeudy. I'd take him ahead of Gabe Davis.
Yeah, in
Go on.
that tier, yeah, I want to take guys who are not likely to fall, and Cooks is not likely to fall. If anything, he's likely to move up. Because it doesn't seem that Dallas is going to sign any meaningful receiver. I don't think if they sign Zay Jones, for instance, Brandon Cooks goes anywhere. I think simply Zay Jones goes back to being drafted in the 170s to 180s, and Tolbert goes back to being undrafted. Hayden Winks noted that Brandon Cooks mostly paid off on overperforming in touchdowns. Well, he didn't look much worse. He was used in the slot and outside, and he was mostly looked at for touchdown scoring opportunities. That offense got kind of worse from a talent perspective. I mean, the running backs now are Zeke and Rico Dowdle. So I fully expect this offense to continue to be high passing, and I'm fine with Brandon Cooks being the touchdown spike guy. And also, I'm glad you noted that. I will say for the people, my offer stands. I put it on Twitter, but I'm gonna say it here live for all the fine folks listening. Get any of these videos to 100 likes, and I'm wearing my emo cowboy hat. The emo eyeliner will come on. I will start transforming into this emo cowboy character fully. So just get those likes up, and 100 likes, eyeliner. We hit another 100 likes, eyeliner and black cowboy hat. These are my promises to the people. So go boost the likes and make this character come to life. I promise it's going to be worth your while.
We have got a long summer to make sure we get there before everything wraps up. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Like I mentioned earlier on, we've got Eric Beinforth from Spike Week on Wednesday. Nez for following Monday for our Underdog stream with us too. Working on a few more guests, and we do have Pat Crane booked for later in the month. It's going to be a very busy best ball season over the next few weeks, along with some standalone strategy videos that will be coming out in the next 2. So do hit that subscribe button and do hit the like button, because Tyler is definitely ready for that eyeliner. In terms of how things are playing out, we see Kirk Cousins going ahead of Matthew Stafford. Is that where you value Kirk Cousins because of like what he's got in Atlanta, or do you have any kind of trepidation over him coming off his Achilles, and now that Michael Penix is there and is going to get all those snaps in OTAs?
I mean, from all accounts, it seems like Michael Penix was Raheem Morris's I'm not getting locked out of quarterback for the future. And, good, bad, or whatever, that's his future play. They paid Kirk Cousins to be the guy now, but they're saying, hey, we've seen this play out before with a guy older in age, any efficiency drop, it could be a cliff. And he's not wrong. We've seen guys like when guys at any position, but especially quarterbacks, start to hit a wall, it can be super precipitous. We saw that with Peyton Manning. We saw that a bit with Brady, although, we know the offense was really rough. And the Atlanta offense has really good pieces on paper, but it's not as strong as you would have liked. I think they really could have used a Roma Dunze or another receiver who's better than Rondale Moore out of the slot and better than Mooney out wide. But we've seen Kirk be a guy who can hit a ceiling on volume and efficiency. And he's got Kyle Pitts, he's got Drake London, and Mooney is there, Bijan is there, and Bijan's a really good pass catcher. So I think from a historical scoring standpoint, we've seen Stafford not really deliver those big spike weeks because they do rush a lot in the red zone with Kyron and whoever else. So I think from a floor, ceiling, and points per game perspective, I think Kirk is correctly valued there. I'm not concerned about the Achilles unless we get news that it's negative, because he's not a rushing quarterback. If he was a rushing quarterback and his price was taking into account rushing upside, I'd be fading that, because Achilles does sap explosion. He's never been an explosive sack avoidance guy. He avoids sacks by getting the ball out quickly and throwing the ball. So, I haven't heard anything from the fantasy docs that tell me to be concerned about the Achilles. And I think from a, offensive standpoint, I think the Rams have more exciting players, but we've seen Stafford not really deliver anything more than like 250 and 2 on such a regular basis that he feels like a floor play. We know Kirk can hit a 30-point game ceiling more often at this point in their careers. So I think the price is fine.
So we are almost back on the clock. We've got 4 running backs so far. A guy that we took last week, Ty Chandler, still hovering around. Oh, and he's just gone. But anybody stand out to you? I mean, we're probably going to have to pay some attention to tight end sooner or later.
I think tight end makes sense to target, and then I don't love Musgrave. I don't love Otten. I prefer Jonnu or Henry here as the tight
Hunter
end.
Henry for me is the first one I'd definitely lean towards. Do you want to double tap tight end, or is there another player at running back or wide receiver standing out?
I think I prefer waiting on tight end. I think probably receiver or running back makes more sense here. I don't mind Jalen Polk as another rookie shot. I think his price could rise.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. I think Polk's one of those players, but you can just start to feel it already is going to be somebody that gets talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Not necessarily he's going to be like this year's Sky Moore or anything like that, but there's always a couple of those players who become, fashionable in the best ball streets or on fantasy Twitter, and they always become dangerous. I mean, I've been burned by Trey Lance before. I've been burned by Marvin Mims last year, and sometimes they hit, sometimes they don't. I'm not trying to make that any reflection on the group think at all, but your point about how players who could get steamed up, Polk definitely feels like a player that with mini camps around could see a rise into the 13th, could see a rise sort of like creeping towards the 12th.
Right.
Because particularly on these offenses with no stud pass catchers, people fall into the trap of somebody's got to catch the ball, somebody's got to do it. And that's where we ended up with Darnell Mooney a couple of years ago with Justin Fields. And it just doesn't really always work out that way. Sometimes you just see offenses that aren't overly efficient. But what the Patriots kind of building is fun, and there's enough upside there that I'd like to believe that by the time Drake May is starting games and Polk has had, 10 weeks, 15 weeks or so to get ready for the end of the season, that it could make a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, Updog notes that Steve Smith was someone that he just gushed about in the pre-draft, and it's easy to see why. Like from a Washington Huskies standpoint, look at JJ Zachariason talks about like teammate score. Rome, his teammate was drafted, in the top 10, and then McMillan was drafted around later. So I think Polk the NFL told us Polk is their second preferred guy in that range, and he has a skill set that lends itself well to being an outside explosive receiver. His profile looks really clean, and like you mentioned, his competition's nothing. It's Kendrick Bourne coming off an ACL at 28 years old with a 1 year and team option contract for less than $8 million a year. He's got another rookie in Javon Baker, who's exciting and fun, but was drafted later, and TBD. And I expect Baker and Polk to get a lot of work because the coaching staff came out and said we want to get young guys involved early and often. Now he said that May and Brissett will be competing in camp, but the young guys justifiably, the only way they get better, and they were a shit team last year, is to let the young guys pop and lift this offense. Brissett brings a way higher floor to this offense. We've seen him be much better than Howell. We saw him be much better than Watson in their offenses. So I think straight away that this offense week one has a much higher floor and ceiling than it did last year, even without Drake May. And May has that extra potential from a deep passing perspective and an aggressive perspective. And Polk is the only guy with juice outside of Javon Baker on that team right now. It's a bunch of I know guys like Pop Douglas, but Pop Douglas was an efficiency PPR type play from the slot. Polk has that outside inside versatility to be their actual wide receiver one. Same with Baker. So I expect some sort of like Polk, Baker, Bourne, and Douglas, 3-4 wide receiver set. And at that point, give me the young guy with juice, that they drafted first.
Yeah, and the thing with Demario Douglas as well, that it was last year, there was constant reports about how much the coaching staff loved him. There's been quite a lot of turnover on that coaching staff. It wouldn't take much for them to lean towards these are our guys, these are the guys we brought in, and just play them. We saw that with the Cardinals last year. You know, it was Michael Wilson. It was Rondale Moore was a player who just wasn't really preferred to be out there at times. So
phased out outside of gadget plays. Yeah.
exactly.
Alex Van Pelt is their new OC coming over from Cleveland, and all the players have said he's going to run kind of like a Cleveland-esque offense. So we should expect run game efficiency and focus, and we should expect tight end focus, and we should expect deep shots with outside wide receivers. I think Polk fits that really well.
Yeah, so we're 2 picks away from our 15th round pick. Kamani Vidal at the top of ADP at pick 168, Antonio Gibson, Isaiah Likely, which would give us another tight end and a stack with Lamar, which works for me. I think we're going to see Todd Monken quite happily mix things in a lot more with 2 tight ends this year. I quite like Roshan Johnson as a bet on him Khalil Herbert being traded, or Khalil Herbert, but I'm open to suggestions here, or even down to Devontae Walker if you really want to push that stack a bit further than we talked about earlier on.
I think it's prudent to take Likely given the Lamar stack, and then given our tight end room, it gives us some late season upside. I think running back's probably the play here, given that's the one place I think we could use more depth. At this point, we're staring at stacking Antonio Gibson with Polk as upside bets in the offense. But Bucky Irving, and Antonio's past ADP. But
let's go Bucky.
I think we've got the coaching speak coming out of camp right now is that consistently last year, Rachaad White struggled with rushing and decision making and aggression, and then his running back coaches said that again, and they keep talking up Bucky Irving in the pass game and in the run game. And also the running back coach, we know Canales left, and Canales likes to use a workhorse running back and tried to mix in. And they said, hey, we tried to mix in Sean Tucker. He's got to work harder. We had Edmonds, we had Vaughn. We know all those guys are just bottom of the barrel stock. And now they drafted Bucky Irving, who has a really interesting profile, who could be a workhorse type back, who could be the 1A in an offense that's undervalued. And so, we're talking once more about who could rise. Well, it's going to be a rookie running back who's getting positive camp news. And right now at 180, I think it's one of the easiest clicks and bets to make, given what we know now and looking forward into camp, looking forward. And, if he falls a round or two based on poor news, it's going to take a lot because it is that young profile. We saw Tank Bigsby get steamed in like the 16th round just on, we got to get this guy involved. So.
Yeah, and I think, some of the reports you mentioned, the Bucks OC, Liam Cohen, said today that he's always liked to use more than one back. He's always relied on at least 2. And I think that I'm not worried about Chase Edmonds. I'm not worried about Sean Tucker. It feels to me like Bucky Irving is the guy they drafted. They want somebody who, can run in the style that they want. And I'm completely fine with it. I like Rachaad White, but he's been woefully inefficient over the last couple of years. Last year, he did slightly better. I think it was had a couple of games where he got over 80 rushing yards for the first time since his one game in this rookie season.
And it was mostly against weaker rushing defenses that he
exactly
above 60 yards rushing. Most of his production was through the pass game and through getting most of the work. So I think if we don't see a huge drop off in the offense, and even if we do, I could easily see this offense just consolidating down to Evans, Godwin, and one of the running backs. For purposes of touchdown spikes and volume. So if Bucky has a path to pay off via either the pass or the run game, I think that's just such a solid bet, considering his draft capital and his drafted profile looks to be I'd rather take a guy like that than Vidal, who's getting steamed up just because the market hates the guys above him, but he's a 5th round rookie. So, that feels like a trap bet at that price.
So we're into the last couple of rounds here. We're well past the round 14 point where Pete Overzet talked about this is the time to scroll the F down.
Right.
Have you got any kind of scroll the F down candidates that you've been finding yourself drafting or mixing in? Who are the players that you really like in this range, roster aside?
Well, so I think one of the things to note is that scrolling the F down makes a lot more sense when you have information, or that you have information that there's not really a big discrepancy in the guys being drafted and the guys not being drafted. So right now, I think pre-draft there were guys that had value, that we knew were likely to get drafted in the NFL draft and have roles. Your Javon Bakers, your Jaquan Jacksons, your Johnny Wilsons. Those guys do get drafted. Now we're seeing guys getting steamed up just because, like you said, the price here after the 14th round doesn't really matter. So people are just clicking who they want. I think the prudent move is to take guys who are undervalued given lack of hype. And so at that point, it's keeping your thumb on the pulse of who's actually being undrafted is the hard part, because you're getting a lot of shifts. But I think guys like Jalen McMillan, who could, come in and earn a role over Trey Palmer, who was just fine. We talked about Jalen Tolbert just as a bet on the offense and depth of the receiver core. A.T. Perry is like a touchdown upside guy. I think Deonta Foreman, just based on health of Chubb and how efficient that system is. Darius Slayton as a spike week guy. If it seems like they're going to have to make dimes look passable, every pun intended, in order to not get fired if they miss the playoffs. And then I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now as a last pick RB2. He's so unsexy versus a lot of the other guys. But right now, he is the RB2 on the Chiefs, and we expect them to be really good. And what if he just gets work because of an injury or, whatever? Pacheco runs hard. I wouldn't be surprised if he misses some time again. So guys like that make a lot of sense to mix in.
Yeah, I mean, there's always that little bit of danger that they bring back 32-year-old Jerick McKinnon for another season, but I'd be fine taking that bet at this point. We do need another tight end. We're back on the clock. Players like Greg Dulcich, Theo Johnson kind of stand out to me. Hayden Hurst, I don't mind as a complete dart throw. Any of these that you'd like to make a case for with 10 seconds left?
I'm probably Fant for the upside, or
Absolutely.
Sanders, just given the ability to just consolidate all the tight ends here.
No, I'm good with Fant.
Yep. Yeah. I think in a vertical offense that makes sense. So right now, I think, last pick here, receiver or running back. What do you feel more strongly about?
I'd probably go running back, given we've got some quite speculative stuff there, and if you want to go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I'm absolutely fine with that. I don't feel quite as strongly about him, but it's not really anybody in this range I feel particularly great about. Sometimes I take Justice Hill because I'm a biased Ravens fan, and I think he'll have a bigger role than some people would like, but I don't find myself particularly enjoying clicking him.
I think when we're talking about undrafted guys, Rasheen Ali, I think if I'd prepped that more in advance, I'd have been very, very comfortable making that click on him, just given his draft profile, knowing it's a thin bet. But if he gets any positive news, he's probably going to have the Vidal steam. JJ Zachariason notes his past target share receptions profile coming out of college was really positive. And Justice Hill's just a guy. Keaton Mitchell has an ACL injury who's going to be out for at least half the season, likely. And Derrick Henry's, over 30. So I think that's another awesome bet from a rookie standpoint, from a draft profile standpoint, and looking ahead week 17, injury contingency, or just we saw guys have 50-yard and a touchdown games from Justice Hill and whoever, Keaton Mitchell, just because of the efficiency of the offense.
No, I love that. So let's take a look at the draft board. Well, actually, do you want to go over our team and then let's take a look at the draft board?
Let's final wrap up. We stay with 2 quarterbacks with Lamar and Kyler. Running backs, we go 6 with Gibbs, Trey Benson, Brian Robinson, Singletary, Bucky Irving, and the meh himself, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Just as another bet on Kansas City stacking with the receiver we took earlier. Marvin Harrison Jr., Zay Flowers, Terry McLaurin, Xavier Worthy, DeAndre Hopkins, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Polk, and then at tight end, we have a 3 build with Hunter Henry, Isaiah Likely, and Noah Fant. I think profiles really well as just floor and ceiling with guys, and Isaiah likely gives us that leverage against Andrews late season, with or without injury.
Yeah, I mean, the tight end room is probably the one position where it feels a little bit shaky, but I don't mind it because I think that the wide receiver room's really strong. I think the running back room is plenty strong enough, and in general, really like it. I like the double tap of the dual threat quarterbacks who could have really high upside. And as we kind of talked about, we've lent into the skinny stacks, and it doesn't feel like we've sacrificed an awful lot to get there. You pull up the draft board, see what everyone else in the room's been doing. Flavorize this. Good friend Steven out of the 7-hole went with Bijan Robinson, Chris Olave, Sam Laporta, Tank Dell, Jaden Reed, Chris Godwin, Jordan Love for the stack, Jalen Warren, Cortland Sutton, Austin Eckler, Blake Corum, Cole Kmet, Jalen Wright, Troy Franklin, Rashad Bateman, Kamani Vidal, Derek Carr, and Jalen Hyatt. In a fun team for a 3-5-6-3, that definitely feels like one I'd be happy drafting. The team to the left of him, though, in the 6-hole, I think they've taken 4 quarterbacks: Will Levis, Matthew Stafford, Tua, and Patrick Mahomes. It's just not something I'd do. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you'd take 4, or would that have to be literally the last 4 picks of the draft kind of territory?
Yeah, if I take 4, I've completely gotten locked out, and I've taken 2 guys that are dogs to start all season, and I'm throwing darts, and I'm probably just accepting that I have to have confidence in this bet that the guys I've taken under 4 are going to get there, because I think taking 4 quarterbacks, taking up that much of your roster to a onesie position is just a really tough ask when, again, we're looking at, playoff weeks. I just don't. The profiles of quarterbacks you're taking at that point are probably really, really rough. Like you've got your Minshew and your Darnold types that are not likely to start all season, and even if they do, they're offering you what, 14.5 points per game average. You want 3 of those guys, much less 4. That's tough. Yeah, I know you don't want to take a 0, but I think at some point you just have to be comfortable in the bet you make.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think on DraftKings you can make an argument for 4. I mean, the team that won $1 million on there, not this season, just gone, the one before, had 4, and they carried Jacoby Brissett for pretty much the entire season. They carried Jordan Love for the entire season. But that difference of 2 extra roster spots really does make a substantial difference.
Yeah.
And here, there just isn't that flexibility to waste roster spots in the same way over on Underdog. But yeah, Tyler, any other kind of closing thoughts on that team or how that draft went?
I think we accomplished a lot of the things we talked about with as far as stacking and dictating. I think at no point did we really feel behind the 8 ball at the turn, and that's a good feeling. I feel like you manage the pockets well. You come away with solid construction as well as players we enjoy. I think we leveraged it well with veterans and rookies and upside bets. Noah Fant, not a guy I'm super excited about, but when we're talking about tight ends, it's super gross. So why not take the shot on a guy who got a contract extension, athletic in a vertical offense with a new OC, with that second contract tight end narrative. It's a fun profile to make with your last pick. And I think one other thing you mentioned from the quarterback construction standpoint, I believe it was Paul, whose eye was inverted, made the very salient point that moving down from 20 rounds pre-draft to 18 rounds here on Underdog post-draft and everything but Superflex, it forces you to prioritize construction and good drafting. So I think those are things that are dictating your EV the most, is really nailing your construction. So I think we nailed that here as far as allocating quality and quantity through. And I'm always going to be comfortable pushing the edge at tight end, knowing that if once you miss out on the elite tight ends, the guys most likely to overperform value year over year are the late tight end guys, because it's such a flat scoring, low scoring position. Invest the least amount of capital and hope that you hit on your guys late, like your McBrides, even Hunter Henry last year paid off, Juwan Johnson. So I think I prefer to build through that. And I think we did that today really, really well.
Nice. So it's going to do it for us. Another fun draft. We will be back next Monday with Nez from the Badge Bros. We're going to pick his mind on all things Underdog, how the current landscape is, talk all that over. Eric Bangford be with me on Wednesday, same time, 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll go for a DraftKings draft, talk about the Spike Week tools they've got. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Loads more content coming your way sooner. If you want to see Tyler in eyeliner, he needs 100 likes. Let's get it.